I'm on a bit of a back heel with this game because I know virtually nothing about The Lord of the Rings. J.R.R. Tolkien's classic literature adventure pretty much codified everything we know about fantasy fiction. Tolkien's settings are so ingrained into the public consciousness that normies can follow stuff like Harry Potter or Dungeons & Dragons perfectly fine, fresh off complaining that the setting of Mario makes it impossible to follow. But of course I am here talking about The Lord of the Rings because the series spawned what was widely hailed as the worst game of 2023, The Lord of the Rings Gollum. The announcement of a Gollum video game tilted a lot of heads because, well, he's a Weasley little shit gremlin. Gollum is a shriveled imp with no strength or significance whose life revolves around the futile chase for power that he can never attain. I feel like Andy Serkis's iconic performance and design in the Peter Jackson movies is about the only reason that anybody even cares who he is. Gollum is not a character that anyone ever wanted to experience for themselves, so how in the hell did they pull off such a strange concept? Well, let's dig into badly! They pulled it off badly! The game begins with Gollum imprisoned by elves when Gandalf, the wizard from the main Lord of the Rings adventure, comes in to talk to him about his life story. Or at least the boring parts, since it glosses over Gollum's actual backstory. Gollum had the One Ring, the doomsday superweapon that the whole series is built around. The hobbit Bilbo Baggins stole it, and Gollum started chasing after him, but he just stopped his pursuit to dick around some mountains because he heard a voice that they'll never explain. And thus we are granted control of Gollum, running through what look to be massive cow pies. Our hero is introduced wallowing in literal shit. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. Alright, so what exactly do you do in a video game about Gollum, a delusional, withered, destitute gremlin whose only attributes are a pungent smell and soiled shorts? Well, that's easy. Uncharted-style platforming. No, really, that's what they went with. Gollum is secretly an Olympian-level gymnast and athlete that can leap, vault, and climb across massive canyons with ease. People familiar with Lord of the Rings have told me there's no way Gollum should be able to do most of this, but whatever! You jump at ledges, cliffs, poles, and specially textured walls. Gollum magnetizes to them automatically, and then you pretty much point at the next surface you want to jump to, and the game does it for you. I don't know what the general attitude is to this kind of platforming, but I don't like it. It's gameplay that plays itself. You just point at a ledge and click, and the game does all the work. I mean, contrast with actual platformers like Mario, where you have full control over your jumps, you're dodging hazards and navigating tricky terrain, there's actual combat now and then. Friggin' Balan Wonderworld is better than this. It at least took some effort! Here, your only real input is trying to figure out where the next jumping point is, because so damn many ledges and climbable surfaces blend into the damned environment! Gollum chases after a bird and runs into some orcs so that you can be introduced to the other main gameplay mode, crappy stealth sections! There are multiple levels where you have to sneak past enemies without being detected, only Gollum can't actually do anything, so they made these sections as basic as they come. There are massive, clearly marked patches of grass or shadows where you're completely invisible, and every enemy has a rock-simple patrol pattern that is extremely easy to chart, if they have a patrol at all. Sometimes there will be a large metal gong where you throw a rock that draws a guard away from the door you need, and that's as advanced as the stealth ever gets. And there was exactly one point all game where running from the enemies actually worked. Everywhere else, getting caught basically kills you instantly. Honestly, these sections are so restrictive and so hard-coded with exactly one solution that they felt more like puzzles than actual stealth gameplay. Puzzles that take forever to play out because everything in this game moves so slowly. Oh, and we're not done copying popular games. When you're in shadow, Gollum's eyes turn green like he's Sam freaking Fisher. And to help out with the stealth and collectibles, Gollum has Batman's detective vision. Except it wears off if you move, so you have to keep turning it on over and over while it keeps flipping off like you're trying to self-induce a seizure. And the detective vision will bring up little orange squiggly lines to guide you through the levels because the devs couldn't make coherent stages on their own. Problem is, the lines often disappear, leaving you stranded, or sometimes they point in two different directions. Even the guide that they added in was botched, my god! Oh, and you do actually have offensive options in the game. Gollum can choke out orcs if you sneak up on them. But he can't choke out orcs that wear helmets. About 90% of them wear helmets. This mechanic is pointless. And I don't have much input on the art direction other than Gollum looks like a cartoon while everything around him is realistic, so he never looks like he belongs in this universe. But the designs of the orcs bug me. They look like apes. They look like Gorilla Grodd's default skins in Injustice 2, or the apes from Tim Burton's garbage Planet of the Apes remake. Gollum slips by a few orcs by feeding them to a giant spider. Then he gets chased into a cave by some dudes riding on dragons, and then some dudes with untextured faces catch you. Yeah, the game assumes that you're already deeply entrenched in the Tolkien lore, because it doesn't explain anything that's going on. Not unless you buy the Lore Compendium DLC for the reference section that most games have by default. The lore costs $5, and I hear it's riddled with grammar mistakes. And they also charge for made-up language dialogue and idle animations. Eat all of the shit. Another thing that the game doesn't explain is Gollum's personality. And no, I don't mean how he's about as appealing and likable as rectal cancer. Gollum has a split personality with two different voices that talk to each other. There's Smeagol, his original self, who's docile, naive, and really has just degraded into whining about everything around him. And there's Gollum, the violent, obsessive, cynical side that's always out for himself. Throughout the game, there will be dialogue choices where you choose to respond as either Gollum or Smeagol, and when you do, it cuts to a little mini-game where you have to argue between the two halves to get the choice that you want. It's an interesting narrative feature that's frustrating to use and doesn't really matter. The choices are so vague that it can be difficult to guess which one goes to which side, but more to the point, your choices don't matter. Up until the very last exchange of the game to pick an ending, your choices don't affect the story at all. Even when you're choosing which character's lives to spare or let die, whoever you save just disappears out of the story anyway. And while there does seem to be a Gollum-Smeagol alignment mechanic, it doesn't do anything except change the title of Chapter 9. Congratulations! The one kinda interesting mechanic in the entire game is a complete waste of time. Anyway, Gollum is captured by orcs and forced to do slave labor in a prison. They make you walk alongside an old guy going down into the mines. Then you walk by people giving Gollum orders. Then you run away from some beast to lure them into cells. Then you walk to another orc that gives you new orders. Then you walk around another area collecting the tags of dead workers. Then you sit in line with prisoners while some are loaded onto a cart to the tower. And then you have to walk back to your cell. That was like half an hour of nothing happening. But fine, they set the scene that the prison is a really bad place. Now we go about helping Gollum escape. Right? So then, they have you walk with the old guy down to more tunnels. And then you crawl until you blow up some barrels. And then you walk back to your cell again. And then you walk to another part of the dungeon while the old guy babbles at you. Finally, you get some actual gameplay where you run for more beasts, a few quick stealth encounters, and a long climbing section. But screw that! We need to do more chores as Gollum is sent back down into the mines to pick up more tags! Most of this damn game is the busy work filler platforming broken up by walking simulator sections where you just go to a marked point and win! It feels like you spend hours doing nothing! You know how I complained in the Guardians of the Galaxy game that you have to walk a really long way listening to banter before you get to the sick-ass laser fights? Yeah, Gollum is that without the sick-ass laser fights. Or the interesting dialogue. Or the sense of humor. Or the fun setting. Or the emotional investment. Or the engaging characters. Or the plot that you care about. Gollum is a modern Ghost Train Ride AAA game if you took out literally all the stuff that people care about. And even for what little gameplay is present, I keep running into problems. There's a stealth section where you drop into a tunnel and there are two directions you can go, except one plonks you in the middle of a bunch of orcs where there's nowhere to go. It's like they wanted to make more open-ended stealth, but they couldn't actually design it for crap. Gollum's crouch to avoid enemies doesn't always work, because if you leave the ground for any reason, you have to release the button and re-hold it before it actually functions. Dialogue options are glitched to where the press X to select prompt appears on all of them. Water is a migraine to navigate because if you try to look up, the surface of the water turns solid and blocks your view of everything except Gollum's shriveled ass. There are so many rooms where you can't figure out for the life of you which surfaces are climbable or where the next ledge is because the room looks like it's completely comprised of shit! So you get stuck because they couldn't signpost a hallway correctly! One orc spotted me but couldn't grab me because I was sitting on a ledge that put me at his eye level instead of on the floor. So his brain fractured! And somewhere else the orcs apparently stuck a deaf guy on guard duty because I walked up to the hard-coded distraction and played bongos on the damn thing, and he didn't flinch! And the punchline? When I finally got the guard to move so that I could explore this corner of the room, there's nothing back there. Dumbass was guarding nothing! Okay, so where the hell do I go to exit this room? There was another ledge going up that I couldn't friggin' see! But my favorite level design botch is this little stealth encounter that you have to jank around in order to solve. See, you're supposed to trigger a distraction to get past the guards, but I can't. Your shot is obstructed by invisible walls, and the guard patrols are too tight for how slowly Gollum moves. The only way that I found past this room is to just run past the enemies, which doesn't work anywhere else. And one time I had to reload a checkpoint because I couldn't interact with story triggers with guards chasing me. The guards are supposed to stop chasing me if I stay out of sight, which I am. You heap of shit! The game also crashed, because of course it did, but all that pales next to a game bug that crept in around this same time. You see, my save file got corrupted. Here is a dialogue that Gollum has when he first gets to the prison and meets the Beastmaster orc.
What does beasts mean, precious? What does it mean? They'll feed us to some beast. But we told him. Smeagol will find it, we swears.
And here's the dialogue that played the next time that I died and respawned.
What does beasts mean, precious? What does it mean? They'll feed us to some beast.
And the time after that.
What does beasts mean, precious? What does it mean?
And the time after that.
What does beasts mean, precious? What does it mean?
And the time after that.
What does beasts mean, precious? What does it mean?
And the times after that!
What does beasts mean, precious? What does it mean?
The entire rest of the game, this dialogue exchange played every single time that I spawned. And just to prove that I'm not editing it myself, you can see Gollum's lips move to voice it out.
What does it mean? They'll feed us to some beast. But we told him.
Every death from this point onward was followed by this annoying-ass squealing just to add insult to injury. And trust me, somewhere around the 4,000th time that you've heard it, Smeagol screaming is friggin' nails on a chalkboard! Okay, plot. Gollum is in prison with a really old guy who tells him there are maps in the Dark Tower which they need to find a way to escape. And don't get excited, the game will pull up maps of almost every area if you pause with the center pad. But the maps do nothing. I'm not sure you can even use them for navigation if you wanted to. Also, the old guy's beard is prehensile. Seriously, his animations will have his beard bend upwards and downwards at will. How do you not catch that? Beardo sends you on a mission to blow up a bridge, and even having played this part twice and gone back over the footage, I still have no idea what demolishing this bridge actually accomplishes, but they trust Gollum with this vital mission because he's good at climbing things. Congratulations, you're on the same level of villainy as Slipknot.
The man who can climb anything. Wonderful.
Well, he can climb almost anything because I could never count on these walls you run across to work worth a shit. You blow the bridge, nothing happens, and then more walking! And more chores, as they send you running around working switches to dump food into pits of orc babies. And then you walk back to your cell again. The game rigs your walking back to yourself so that you can't run, by the way. They forcibly slow you down so that you can listen to important exposition. Stuff like...
What's the sun say?
That, sure. That's important. And then they spend another 10 minutes slowly carting you up to meet the wizard who runs the place called the Candleman, who then makes you do a stupid-ass puzzle where you bumble around random elements breeding and hatching a bird. And Gollum gets a new cellmate, and they make you train him to do even more chores with a companion system that gets used once past this point. And then you train your bird, which comes up 0 times past this point. What even is this game? I'm stuck in like a full hour of busy work, and even when you do something, it's barely even gameplay. In fact, let's watch some of this tedious-ass platforming in action while I tell you who's responsible for this rancid mound of pig crap. Gollum came to us courtesy of a studio called Daedalic, a small-time indie studio that primarily made point-and-click adventure games with the odd strategy game on the side. And one day they just got their hands on the Lord of the Rings license and decided to try and break into the AAA mainstream space with Gollum. The small-timers just decided one day to make a massive, fully 3D platforming stealth game with AAA production values, no less than 5 categories where Daedalic had no experience to speak of. The small team at Daedalic was woefully underprepared for a project of this magnitude. They tried multiple times to scrounge up more staff and funding, but to no avail. With around 100 employees and about 1/10 of the budget that they needed, Daedalic would realize more and more as time went on that they were way over their head. Basically, all of Daedalic's ideas for the game had to be scrapped. Character relationships, companions, branching stories and cutscenes, and a minigame to manifest storyline decisions as Gollum versus Smeagol. The game wound up being delayed a whole 2 years, and that final year of work, the whole dev team knew that the game was a lost cause. Toxic management creating what's been described as a hostile work environment didn't help. Development went so bad that the now traditional solemn JPEG going "sorry our game sucks" was ready within a few days of launch. And it was written by an AI because, last I checked, the game's name is not The Lord of Ring Gollum. For all the scrapped features I've read about, though, none of them pertain to actual gameplay mechanics. The only actual game stuff I've heard getting cut was a Breath of the Wild-inspired free climbing system, because yes, they were upset that climbing wasn't even more of the game than it is in the finished product. For Pete's sake! I'd almost hazard a guess that the studio that makes point-and-clicks just didn't know that mainstream games need more actual gameplay. But I would also guess that a studio that makes story-driven adventure games could write a decent story. But they didn't! Seriously, I started the game over from where I left off in the charity livestream explicitly to pay attention to the story, and almost every single plot point gets dropped at a moment's notice. There's a witch in the prison you can talk to and whom all the characters call attention to. She does nothing. You'll hear chatter that there's a rebellion brewing in the prison. Nothing comes of it. They tease out backstory that the old guy prisoner helping you escape is a king of something. Even if you take both story opportunities to save him, he just vanishes without explanation. They basically stop you dead to point out a symbol that marks traitors, and it's on the Candleman's face. That never comes up. Candleman forces you to listen to lore about a fight between 2 kings that pisses him off but never gets explained. There's a truckload of teases that the Candleman's got tension with the mouth of Sauron and he's chasing his own agenda in secret, but neither ever leads to jack squat. They make a big song and dance slowly teasing out that the prison's true function is to breed orcs for a war that never happens. They tease out a mystery of why the Candleman is protecting Gollum because he's on some special list, but they never follow it up or explain why. I think we're just left to infer that Sauron is keeping Gollum alive to get the ring somehow. And even that never comes into play. There's a brief subplot that the orcs know the ring is in the Shire where all the hobbits live, but you choke out the one guy who knows where it is, and it's never brought up again. But most egregious, there's this evil lady who runs the prison who has a lengthy subplot setting up that she's going to betray the Candleman and usurp him as the main villain. She completely drops out of the story, never to be mentioned again, about halfway through. It's just a joke. The game perpetually drags its heels to drown you in story, and the punchline is there is no story. Whatever, you have a timed platforming section to kill an orc before he spills where the Shire is, and then... Hold on. Are the orcs' helmets covering up their eyes? Why does getting spotted kill you then? Gollum gets a new cellmate that can drive a cart out the front gate, so he puts his escape plan into action, and the game's platforming is somehow getting worse. I got hung up on corners to where I couldn't shimmy along ledges like I need to. Multiple times trying to drop to a climbable surface failed. I got stuck in midair. I got caught onto a wall sideways somehow. My running jumps would fail at random. Gollum would fail to cling to ledges. At one point, the backwards jump stopped working and the prompt failed to appear all over the place. And the level design has gotten so abysmal that now the game's actively hiding the ledges that you jump to. At one point, I was just leaping all over creation, trying to find the way forward, Smeagol screaming at me the whole time!
What does beasts mean, Precious? What does it mean?
Until eventually I just lucked out and skipped a good chunk of the level by clipping a climbable surface and dumb luck rolling into a checkpoint. Still have no idea how I managed that. And by the way, there are platforming sections where the game drops a checkpoint after literally every other jump. They didn't trust their own platforming system to accomplish anything. Eventually, they dump you in a room to swim in actual shit as the game manifests its own destiny. This is a puzzle where you run around flipping switches to raise or lower the water level until your fat guy friend can cross platforms to reach the switches for you. It's slow and infuriating because Gollum will only actually climb out of water at a precious few infuriatingly specific spots. But the very last switch at the top of the room threw me for a loop. I can't figure out how to get up there, but there are 3 or so floating barrels and 2 platforms hanging from the ceiling. The solution has to involve those. Eventually, I had a plan. Push a barrel over one of the platforms, drain the water, jump on top of the barrel, and then when the water rises, the barrel will lift me up to jump onto the switch. Perfect plan. Except for this. Yeah, they forgot to program any physics for the barrels on dry land, so even lightly grazing one hurtles it into the sun. I spent ages trying to get this to work before having to concede that the physics are too broken. This is the one point all game where I had to use a walkthrough because it turns out the 2 floating platforms are on an off-screen pulley system and the barrels, with their physics of helium balloons, weigh down one to lift the other. There is not one single hint that they work like this anywhere. Oh, and the game introduces an actual new enemy type for about 3 minutes as you climb through spiders out of nowhere. There's no way to lose or fight the spiders once they see you, and if one's on your tail, the checkpoints don't trigger. So glad they got their shit together to do a whole one new thing, and it sucks monkey butt. But we finally escaped the friggin' orc prison! 5 chapters out of 10, set aside for nothing happening except a jailbreak. We are finally past the first setting and initial plot points of the game. No more chores, no more boring-ass orc lore. We can finally get back to... what was Gollum doing again? He just wanders back to the cave from the first level. Oh yeah, Gandalf! I completely forgot this thing had a framing device because it hasn't been mentioned in like 6 hours! What follows is a long walking simulator section where Gollum slowly leads his dumb ugly fat friend into a cave to feed him to Shelob, a giant spider who... Hey, wait a second! I thought Shelob was a sexy woman torso glued to a spider body! Shadow of War was full of shit! And the whole time you do this, Gandalf is expositing on Gollum's backstory where he killed his friend Deagle to get the ring. Even Gandalf wants to skip to the actual interesting bits of Gollum's story! Yeah, this is why people have been saying that a Gollum game was kind of doomed from the concept phase, because even past the terrible gameplay, the boring-ass story, and the mountains of bugs, you're also stuck with one of the worst gaming protagonists ever made! Gollum is basically a drug addict that's not even trying to get help. He needs the One Ring for no other purpose than just his obsession, and he continually rips his own life to shreds in the futile pursuit of it. Nothing is ever his fault, of course. He constantly blames everyone around him for the easily foreseeable consequences of his own actions. Even at the start of the game, when he's huddled up in a mound of shit and can't find food, it's the land's fault for being barren, not his fault for being constitutionally incapable of taking one single action that would actually improve his life. Even if you're tempted to feel bad for the living scrotum being in prison and tortured, and you feel good at the one moment of actual triumph when he finally escapes, he just goes right back to his literal shithole from the start of the game and immediately sets about murdering the one friend that he made on accident. While Gandalf exposits that he was murdering his only friends before the ring turned him into a walking ballsack. His alter ego Smeagol is no less infuriating, mainly existing to whimper and play the eternal victim so that Gollum can convince himself that his own self-interest is a noble cause, although my outlook on Smeagol might be more generous if I didn't have to listen to him whining every fucking time that I spawn!
What does beasts mean, Precious? What does it mean?
Gollum is a pathetic little shit gremlin whose only power or relevance comes from having fallen ass backwards into being a pawn for two different supervillains. And I just have no idea how anybody could think that a whole story about this loser was ever a good idea. Oh, come on! Do you need to cling to the movie rights that badly? You kind of have a boss fight with Shelob as she chases you through some caves while the game does that thing of pointing the camera back at you so you can't see obstacles coming up. I hate levels like this. I don't care if they did it in Crash Bandicoot and Pepsi Man. It sucked back then, and it still sucks! It took me way too long to notice there's a green trail on the floor telling you where to run and jump. My bad. Whoa! And I just fell out of the game world. Because of course I did. And I'm pretty sure that this was the second time it's happened. The first clip through the floor I couldn't tell if I just died from some unrelated game bug. You have a Smeagol Gollum choice here to either save the fat guy from Shelob or let him die. He gets eaten even if you choose to save him. So why'd you even give me the choice, dumbass? Alright, you're gonna have to bear with me here because the game pretty much completely resets and changes stories at Chapter 7. The orc stuff that you spent hours messing with is almost completely forgotten as the game launches into a new half-baked story about elves and magic bullcrap. Gollum just out of nowhere is captured by elves and immediately he wants to escape. Because damn these elves with their clean air and their good food and their nice people who don't beat us senselessly and their lack of slave labor. Screw those assholes! Gollum tries to escape, but he can't because the place is surrounded by a magic haze. Nobody can get in and out except for Gandalf, who can come and go whenever he pleases, somehow. The haze was made by a bunch of wizard elves, but they all died because the haze's power source is unstable. The only survivor was this blind girl named Mel, who's in prison because of some babble about darkness. Gollum lies to her that her teacher's alive to get her help, which works out because not only was Mel porking her teacher, but it turns out that he actually is still alive and he's trapped in the haze's power source somehow. Trust me, the dialogue is written so badly that I'm piecing together what I can and skipping mountains of fluff, like the Elf King trying to figure out Gandalf's agenda, which goes nowhere.
It was here in Mirkwood where it took shape again. Sauron's shadow.
Don't utter his name.
Hey dipsticks! That's Harry Potter, not Lord of the Rings! If you idiots made a Harry Potter game, we all know it would probably star Filch! The point to all this is that you spend several hours running around the elves' castle doing more chores. Getting shit for Mel, climbing into and exploring quarters to get shit for Mel, and then leading her into the woods. More climbing, more walking sims. It was like 3 whole damn hours where nothing happens! I could have watched a whole Lord of the Rings movie in the time Gollum spends twiddling his thumbs! Actually, that's a lie. If I have 3 hours to kill, I'm watching The Batman. Don't worry though, because the elf levels are still bugged out the ass. Gollum vanishes when you touch this item. I got hung up on the environment non-stop, and it took me 15 carking minutes to get this basic wall-running surface to work! You know, I'm starting to think there was merit to reviewers who said they couldn't finish the game for all its bugs! There were 2 or 3 brief, rock-simple stealth sections around elves among your list of chores, and that's pretty much it. And Gollum can't kill any of the elves because he says they're too strong. He can choke out orcs twice the elf's size, but the elves are too strong for him to take on. Right. I only bring this up for this humorous moment where the AI bugged out again. I'm supposed to be hidden and invisible, but the elves saw me, and now they're just standing there judging my life choices because the game says they can't kill me. Cheese and rice. Oh look! Dialogue that only plays in subtitles because they forgot to record it! Look! Gollum sends his pet bird to get help, and in a massive case of what did you think would happen, the bird goes to the Candleman, who leads the orcs in the mouth of Sauron to raid the elf village. Again, they never explain why in the hell this dude wants Gollum so badly, but war is somehow breaking out over the talking tumor. You take Mel to the gate to open the haze, and you hit the single worst part of the game, in my opinion. Mel needs to know where her friends were standing when they closed the haze, and to solve this puzzle, you need to wander this big-ass room looking for a series of completely unmarked, near-universally invisible clues, which took me half a damned hour! And it's really confusing because the first clue is given out for free because the detective vision picks up a scent leading to the item you need, but that smell only appears for other items after you've stumbled across them on your own. How is that? Even by this game's abysmally low standards, who the hell thought this was good gameplay? And the cherry on top? I got stuck in the water. The game's swimming mechanics are so hosed that the game couldn't tell if I was able to exit the water here or not, so I just got hung up on the air and had to reload a checkpoint. Gollum's eyes are still moving, though. Enjoy, Gollum. This is your life now. They open the haze, but Gollum just has an out-of-nowhere freak-out where he briefly remembers killing his friend Deagle, which finally clues in Mel that he's nuts and she ditches him. Gollum's brought back to the elves, but don't worry, just because Mel is gone doesn't mean there aren't more friggin' chores to do!
The children love to take my light stones up to the gardens to play. Would you not help me find them?
And now Gollum is all super worried about Mel's well-being, despite the fact he was openly planning to murder her about 5 minutes ago. So that's how you make a narrative where Gollum's the hero. Give him a made-up girlfriend and follow her story! Seriously, Gollum has zero agency or role in the plot from Chapter 7 onwards. This is now entirely Mel's story of trying to save her lost love and to protect her people from a magic doohickey, and Gollum's just along for the ride. And my friend Miles, who's much more into Lord of the Rings than I am, swears up and down that none of this has the first thing to do with Gollum's actual story or character from the books and movies. I think they just ran out of ideas for a Gollum game and started writing unrelated fan fiction. Whatever, the orcs kidnap Mel and they attack the elves. Whatever motivation the bad guys had for wanting Gollum is just thrown out the window because Candleman wants the source now for some reason, and he knows what the source is because he can see through birds' eyes. They're just making stuff up on the fly now. There's platforming over trees where, again, it is legitimately confusing figuring out where you're supposed to go.
What does beasts mean, Precious? What does it mean?
Shut your dumb, whiny, shit-eating, gingivitis-ridden trap, Smeagol! And you have to sneak through both orcs and elves, even though the elves are on your side. Save the cook elf or escape. Well, she's been nice to Gollum. Let's go save her. She died anyway. Oh well, there comes a choice between the orc prison dude and the elf prison lady where they're in a standoff and you have to throw a rock to distract one so they die. Well, goodbye, Mr. Orc. This is for all the breeding that you made Gollum do— wait, no, I threw it! You stupid motherfucker! There's an achievement for saving both of these elves, but they both died to corking glitches! You sneak through orcs, I found a drum that's glitched to where throwing rocks at it doesn't work, and Gollum gets caught anyway, so what was the shittin' point? And you and Mel get into the source and meet Gwendol, her teacher, and the source is unstable and about to explode, so you have to work some switches to blow it up before the Candleman can summon Sauron. Again, this is all my best guess as to what's going on. I doubt even the game's writers can summarize what's happening at this point. They do introduce a new gameplay mechanic for the final level, though. Now the platforms move slowly! Yeah, that's the best idea they had. Slightly moving platforms. They shoehorn in a conflict that Smeagol wants to stay with Mel while Gollum wants to go after the ring, and this is important because Smeagol wants to kill Mel's current boyfriend to make that happen. So yes, both halves of Gollum's personality are complete dog shit. The game has two endings depending on whether you choose to save or kill off Gwendol, and if you choose to save him, you get the infuriating spectacle of Gollum being perfectly capable of strangling orcs with helmets, the little piss boil. And once you demolish the source, which is important somehow, you get an actual final boss. Like 3 minutes of basic platforming until Gollum strangles the Candlemen in a cutscene. That's it. Friggin' Shelob was a more meaty encounter, and she wasn't even relevant to the plot! Gollum tries to kill Gwendol in his sleep to steal Mel back, but he doesn't and they live happily ever after. The alternate ending has Mel find out that Gollum killed Gwendol and then she ditches him anyway, and the game ends with Gollum trapped in the mines of Moria screaming impotently at a door he can't open because he's all alone having backstabbed all of his friends. Gee, aren't you so glad you invested all that time into getting Gollum to the end of his journey?
Okay, this is not something that should ever have been attempted. Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Sweet crap, The Lord of the Rings Gollum is abysmal! I think the game got patched before Daedalic bit the dust, because yeah, this killed their dev team. And even patched, the game is completely insufferable, with gameplay that barely has you doing anything and sucks at the few things it even attempts to do. It's like they saw modern AAA narrative-driven games like Uncharted, but thought that all the worst parts of those games were the best parts and needed to suck more. All padding, no substance, alternating between overly restrictive, annoying, slow platforming and overly restrictive, annoying, slow stealth. They force you through a sea of tedious story beats that almost never amount to anything, drag out the garbage story with no end of pointless busywork, and they saddle you with a protagonist so bad you feel like throwing him off the cliffs on purpose just to end his misery. I asked at the start of this video how they picked Gollum of all people to headline a game, and it had to have just been for name recognition. They clearly didn't have any actual ideas. The story just gives up and follows their original character Do Not Steal, and the gameplay is almost entirely busywork. The pitch meeting began and ended with "let's do Gollum because he's a big name," and the rest feels like it was improvised as they went along. The million-dollar question of 2023 was which game was worse, Gollum or Skull Island: Rise of Kong, which I've also reviewed. I'm torn on the question myself. Both games are mostly padding thanks to Kong's horrid map design. Kong is uglier and buggier, at least on PS5. But on the other hand, Kong is an actual game with combat and real platforming, and its development was hampered by a garbage publisher imposing impossible conditions. Gollum was in the hands of a dev team with carte blanche to do whatever they wanted, and they wasted that shot on a half-baked bad idea. So as far as Gollum vs. Kong goes... But yeah, both in-universe and out, Gollum is just the worst.